Alright, so every day this week we are looking at a Frankenstein adaptation in film. Talked about this quite a bit in the first video of this series. So if you haven't seen that, maybe check that out. Today we are talking about Frankenstein, also called The Curse of Frankenstein from 1957, a British film from the Hammer Studios. So let's get into it. As with all of these, I'm going to be comparing them to the book. I'm going to be comparing their iconography, what generally people think of when they think of pop culture Frankenstein and how much of that is in this movie, and its originality. So, comparing to the book, first category, the scientist. They do name him Victor in this one, and I think in all the subsequent ones we'll get to. The Universal one is the only one that chose a different name. In the book, Victor wants first to create life, and then he wants, after that, he sees that as a stepping stone to bringing people back from the dead. In the film, they first succeed in bringing a creature back from the dead, and then he wants to go on to create life on his own. In the book, Victor does most of his work pretty isolated, while in the movie, he's got his fiance, his friend is there, he's got at least one servant in the house, and it's just like in town, so not quite as isolated. In the movie, he seems to go mad by the end, and in the book, he gets exhausted, but I wouldn't say, based on my interpretation, that he went mad in the book. Doesn't make any comments about seeing himself as God, which relates to the book accurately, unlike the Universal film where he said now he knows what it's like to be God. In the movie, he never seems to regret what he's done. Obviously, he's upset at some of the things that the creature immediately, is like, what have I done? Why did I do this? In the movie, they actually kill the creature. His friend shoots him in the head, and he's dead, and they bury him, and then Victor goes back in secret and digs him back up and reanimates him a second time, which does not happen in the book. And in the book, the scientist, he dies of exhaustion in the Arctic. The film ends with him being led to the guillotine because they believe that the creature kills his servant Justine, but no one else knows about the creature other than his friend, who is upset at what he's done, and so he is being executed because everyone thinks that he's the one that killed Justine. So, different fate. So, in terms of accuracy to the book, this movie gets a 3 out of 10 in the scientist department. As for the creature, as I mentioned last week, the creature in the book appears 16% of the way through the story. Here, the creature doesn't appear until 59% of the way through the story. 48 minutes out of 83 minutes. The movie uses one main body, whereas the book says that he's building a body. The movie specifies that he specifically chose a genius brain, although they do say that there's a scuffle between he and his friend where it gets damaged, and so that's why in the movie it doesn't work right. In the book, they don't specify the brain. Again, as I mentioned last week, the book describes the creature as yellowish. In this film, it is green. We've got no electrodes like we had in the Universal version, so that's good. Don't want to go over every single thing here. In the book, the creature doesn't attack until it's provoked later on. It doesn't attack in the first encounter that Victor has with it. In this, it attacks and kills Justine, who is supposedly pregnant at the time, just kind of unprovoked. Both have enhanced strength. The movie version is slow, while the book version is fast. The creature does escape in the book, but not for nearly as in the movie, but not for nearly as long as it is in the book. It doesn't speak like the one in the book. In this movie, it kills a blind man, whereas in the book, it kind of, I don't want to say befriends, but it watches this family in a cottage for over a year, I want to say, which has the blind man there, and it doesn't ever attack them. So it like took that element, but then totally changed how that experience went. No requests of a wife or anything like that. And in the film, the creature dies by dissolving in acid, whereas in the book it's somewhat ambiguous, but it seems like he's still alive at the end. So the creature, only 3.5 out of 18 possible points there. Supporting cast. So in the book, the scientist has no assistant. In the film, there's a character whose name is Paul Kremp, who is first the tutor of a young Victor Frankenstein, and then as Victor grows up, they become friends, and then Paul eventually becomes his assistant. So they're kind of combining 3 or 4 different characters into this one character for the film, which I understand it makes it a little bit more seamless, but it's not quite accurate. The father is not shown in the film. I think he's dead before the film starts, so when we first see young Victor, the father has already died. In the film, Elizabeth is his cousin, which is accurate to the book, and they are engaged, but they are not raised as brother and sister like they are in the book. So in the film, we got the blood incest, but not the household incest. So take that however you will. We've got Justine, who's a servant from the book. Here, she's not only his servant, but also his mistress. He is cheating on Elizabeth with Justine. We've added in some infidelity for some reason. Perhaps to make him less likable, because in the Universal version, I feel like we were supposed to be more sympathetic to him, so maybe they wanted to distance from that one. We've got no Clerval. Again, Paul in the film is kind of several other characters from the book. So we don't have a Clerval, we don't have a Professor Waldman. We do have, as I mentioned, the blind man, but we don't have the rest of his family or the cottage or that whole experience that the creature has. In the film, the only person that the creature kills other than the blind man, and perhaps the blind man's grandson, it's more implied than explicit, but the only other character that he kills is Justine, because the rest of Victor's family is not in the film. So in the book, he kills several members of Victor's family, but they're not here. But the big one here is that in the book, as I talked about in the first video, all the events of the story are told. None of them are actually happening. They're just stories being told and being written down and being sent in letters and stuff like that. And in this movie, we have a framing device similar to that, where Victor Frankenstein, supposedly mad, in prison, awaiting death, requests a priest, and he tells his story to a priest. So in the book, it was a ship captain, so this is a little bit different, but we at least get that framing device, so it's somewhat more accurate than the Universal version. So supporting cast, I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 11. And then the last category for comparing to the book, we've got the setting. In the book, it takes place in a normal house. In the film, it seems to be his house, but it's at least a mansion, if not a castle. It's kind of hard to tell between the exterior shots and the interior shots. The interior shots look more like a castle in certain scenes. So it's not a separate location, like in the Universal version, but a little bit different. This film has a couple time jumps at the beginning, and then a couple more throughout. But it's hard to tell exactly how long the story takes place, but it seems to be shorter than the book, because the book takes place over multiple years. And then, as I mentioned, we've got the story being told to the pastor, which is not the same as the story being told to the ship captain, but it's similar. So I gave it 1 out of 3 for the setting. So if you add all that up, if I added correctly, this movie gets a 10 out of 42 possible points for accuracy to the book. But that's not all we're talking about. Let's talk about iconography. So things that people associate with the popular version of Frankenstein that is present in this movie. We've got a scientist bringing the dead back to life. We've got a creature that is dangerous and violent to humans. We do have the "It's alive" line in this, although in this film it's not said in response to the creature, it's said in response to a dog that they bring back to life before he actually starts working on the creature itself. We've got a general idea of the creature's appearance. It's very different than the Universal version, but it's still green. It's still that kind of stitched up together. It's still very slow and kind of arms outstretched and clumsy, which is not at all like the book. So even though it's not the same as the Universal version, and that look is trademarked by Universal, so it couldn't be the same, so they had to distance themselves from it. It's still closer to that and to that pop culture idea than what's in the actual book. We've got Frankenstein going mad, which most people associate with him. And this castle setting, again, it's not clear that it's a real castle. Might just be a very large, elaborate house, but certain scenes of it certainly look and feel like a castle, so I gave it a point for that. So it gets +6 for iconography. And then the originality, again, this is not necessarily good or bad. It's just things that this one did that's original to this movie, at least as far as I know. We've got the infidelity with him cheating on his fiance for some reason. We've got the fact that he brought the creature back to life after it was killed. We've got the creature's death by acid. We've got the fact that Victor is framed for murder. We've got the pastor character who's not in any of the other versions. We've got Victor sentenced to the guillotine, and we see him walking to the guillotine at the end. And then again, we've got the castle, which is original to this over the book and the Universal film before this. So that's 7 points added on to originality. So if we add up all of our numbers, we've got 10 out of 42 compared to the book. The Universal version got 10.5, so a little bit less on that. We've got 6 bonus points for iconography. The Universal version got 8. We've got 7 bonus points for originality. The Universal version got 6 for a total score of 23 points, which compares to the original film's 24.5. So very close, but the Universal edges it out by just a little bit. Not that these points actually matter. They're just talking points more than anything else. My only other note that I have for this one is there's no explanation for why he shifts his focus from bringing creatures back from the dead to bringing creatures to life or creating life. In the Universal film, he's got this concept of himself as God, and I can create life. That's not present here. And in some other versions, he brings people back, or he thinks creating life is a stepping stone to then being able to bring someone back. But here, he already is able to bring something back, and then it's unclear why he then decides to try to create something new. So, just kind of an interesting note that I made. At least I thought it was interesting. So that is what I've got for what in the U.S. is referred to as The Curse of Frankenstein. It's got Grand Moff Tarkin and Count Dooku. They're going to be I don't know what order the weeks are going to be in: Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, and who's the fourth one? The Wolfman. But all these Hammer films from the UK, a lot of them have. Of course, I can't think of the actors' names now. Christopher Lee and man who played Grand Moff Tarkin, whose name I can't remember offhand. Someone's gonna yell at me, but that's fine. But they're in a bunch of these movies together, so it's just kind of interesting because the only thing I've ever seen them in is Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. So enough on that. I'm just rambling now. That's what I've got on The Curse of Frankenstein. It's also in color. So if you like the idea of watching an older classic horror movie, but you're not a fan of black and white like the original Universal film is, this one might be a better fit for you because it does have color, so you can see the creature's appearance more intensely, and the blood and stuff, which apparently it's cute now reading how people reacted to it back then, and oh my gosh, we almost got an X rating because we showed blood for a few seconds, and it's pretty tame by today's standards, but that's how it goes. So that's another note about that version. But that's all I've got. Feel free to let me know any thoughts that you have, but that's all that I have. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Hey everybody, Sam Tom here. Just wanted to let you know that I have 2 channels. If you're watching my music content, I also have a movie channel where I talk about movies and TV shows. If you're watching my movie content, I have a music channel where I do song covers, instrument demos, things like that. So feel free to check that out. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.